Yom HaShishi Echulu HaShamayim V'Yaretz V'Chol Tzom.
Breakneck Through the Bible, presented by Torch Dallas. Your host, Rabbi Bentzi Epstein. Welcome, Rabbi, to our next episode in the continuing series of Breakneck Through the Bible.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you for being here as we delve into the continuing story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. So I think we are up to page 19 in our Stone Chumash, chapter 3, verse number 17, which we now turn to after last episode talking all about women's 10 curses that she got. We're now up to man's 10 curses. Take it away.
To Adam, he said, "Because you listened to the voice of your wife and ate of the tree about which I commanded you, saying, 'You shall not eat of it,' accursed is the ground because of you. Through suffering shall you eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles shall it sprout for you, and you shall eat of the herb of the field. By the sweat of your brow shall you eat bread until you return to the ground from which you were taken. For you are dust, and to dust shall you return."
Okay, so now those are the three verses where it talks about Adam's curses. Now let's start back from verse 17, and now let's dissect this verse by verse.
To Adam, Hashem said, "Because you listened to the voice of your wife, and ate of the tree about which I commanded you, saying, 'You shall not eat of it,' accursed is the ground because of you. Through suffering shall you eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles shall it sprout."
Okay, so, thorns and thistles shall it sprout for you, and shall eat the herb of the field.
Yeah.
Right? So at this point in time, man, right, is now going to have to start planting and working the ground. Till now, man did not have to work in our literal sense of working in the field. And what happened was, everything was perfect in the Garden of Eden.
But Rabbi, he still had to do some activity, some action, some behavior to even cause the fruit to
grow in the trees. Correct. And that was prayer.
Yes.
Right? That man, remember, was put in the garden to pray. That was our whole job, was to put in the garden to pray and just not to eat from the tree of knowledge till Shabbat came. But their job was to pray. That was how they worked the field. They would pray to God, and everything would just function beautifully.
So, Rabbi, you said until Shabbat came. Are you saying that had we waited until after Shabbat, we could have eaten from the tree?
Yes. From the tree of knowledge. Yes. And right, because as soon as Shabbat would come, right, and Shabbat is also the symbolic of the idea of the Messiah. Right, we would have gone straight into the to the Messianic era, and then we would have been able to eat from the tree of knowledge. Remember, the tree of knowledge was, we couldn't eat from it until we ate from the tree of life, because the tree of life is Torah. The tree of knowledge is all the things that exist in the world, all the science, math, art. And if you don't know what they're there for, then you can't use them. So you first have to eat from the tree of life, which is Torah, understand the purpose of everything that existed. And once you understand it, then you obviously have to go learn about it. But you first have to understand the purpose of why God put them there.
So this has always confused me, Rabbi. We have the two trees. We have the tree of life and the tree of knowledge.
Correct.
The tree of life is Torah.
Yeah.
And the tree of knowledge is, as you said, is the secular.
The knowledges that exist in the world, not secular, just the knowledges that exist in the world.
Which includes the other. the secular knowledge, all the knowledge.
Yeah. Math, science, you know.
So my question is, we learn that Torah is the instruction manual for life. To me, that really talks about knowledge. So I've always thought, oh, gee, the tree of knowledge should be Torah, because the Torah is the compendium of all of our knowledge. And so I've always been confused about that differentiation.
Excellent question, Tom. And let me just articulate your question. Your question is that if the Torah, all knowledge in the world comes from Torah, so how's any separation then between the knowledge that exists in the world, science, math, and beauty, art,
literature,
right, and,
all of that,
and why it all comes from the Torah? So how are you saying they're two separate ideas? So I will tell you that you are correct in its raw sense, that all those things you can learn from the Torah. There's a famous story actually there was a great sage named the Chazon Ish. The Chazon Ish was a rabbi who lived in Israel, greatest sage in Israel. And what happened was somebody once came to him, he needed a blessing. He had a tumor in his brain, and they were going to operate. The doctors weren't sure how to do it, and he came to the Chazon Ish. And the Chazon Ish was a man who only studied Torah, was only, I'll tell you a story about the Chazon Ish, that sometimes he writes, when he's in his responses to questions that were written to him, he says, I don't have the book in my hand. And what that meant was that he had the book on the shelf, but he was so tired, he didn't have enough energy to get up and to get the book. That's what he said, when I don't have the book in my hand. One day, his gabbai, his person who was taking care of him, came in and found him collapsed on the floor. He said, what happened? He said, well, I misjudged the amount of energy I had left before I stopped studying. And I didn't have enough energy to make it to my bed, so I just fell on the floor and collapsed on the floor. Normally I figure out exactly how much energy I need to make it from my desk to my bed. That's the Chazon Ish. The Chazon Ish said to him, gave him a blessing, and he says, before you go, let me tell you how the brain surgeon should do the surgery. And he drew him a picture of the brain, drew him the picture of the tumor. He says he has to go through A, B, C, D, E, F, G, go through these steps, and then he'll be able to do it. And the student said, fine. He went back to the brain doctor, brain surgeon, said, here, by the way, I went to the Chazon Ish, and this is what he told me to tell you. And the brain surgeon says to the student, he says that the Chazon Ish knew more Torah than me, I knew. But that he knows more science than me, that I didn't know. And where did he get that wisdom? He got that wisdom from the Torah. So it is possible to get it all from the Torah. Most of us are not on that level. And so therefore, we say you have the book of knowledge, we have the tree of knowledge, that's the idea of Torah. And then you have the tree of life is Torah. And then you have the tree of knowledge, so that's symbolic of all these other things, I call it, less tangible things in the Torah, which if you're a great enough Torah scholar, you can get it from. But most people need to go ahead and learn it from somewhere else. The Vilna Gaon, who was a great sage, who was alive during the 1700s, American Revolution, he actually wrote a math book based on Torah. And so, some people learn math from his math book, using just concepts that you learn from the Torah. So it is possible to get it, but that's how we look at it, as being two independent trees, a tree of life and the tree of knowledge.
So, Rabbi, where do you learn that if we had simply waited until Shabbos to then eat of the tree of knowledge, we would have been okay?
To eat from it. right? Because God says you can't eat from it now.
He doesn't. Whoa! It says you can't eat from it now.
Right?
I didn't. When in my first studying, Rabbi, I didn't get the sense of the timing of this. That's what's really confusing me.
Mm-hmm.
Because then my follow-up question will be, how much time lapse was there between the time we ate and Shabbos?
So very good. That's a good question. And the answer is not much.
Oh, wow. And did we know that?
So the Talmud in Tractate Sanhedrin gives us a sort of like how the day went. They were created on Friday. And then they had sex and had Cain and his sister and Abel and twin sisters. And then they ate from the tree. And then God came and said what he did do, the whole story of them denying God. And they were like sin punished, like all wrapped up by Friday afternoon. And then God didn't want to kick him out on Friday afternoon, so let him stay till Saturday night. And so really was a long, a long sixth day. But that's what all took place on Friday. And if they would have waited, they could have just waited till that evening. They would have been able to eat from it. Isn't that crazy?
You know, Rabbi, I probably shouldn't say this, but there is that many of us have wives that are not always on time. Here, if he even just waited another 6 hours, we would have been okay. But because she ate of the tree
very fascinating,
a little too early, that wasn't one of the curses. Is always been.
It actually is quite fascinating. Because a woman eventually gains control of time. That's why she's exempt from all the time-bound commandments.
Wow.
Right? So she's considered the one who has control of time. Therefore, she doesn't need the commandments that control time.
Very interesting.
So, so did I answer your question?
Yeah. You're just going to show me where Hashem said, "Don't eat from the tree now," where it implies there's a time frame.
So it's very interesting. So I'm not sure that this is correct, but I think this might be the source. And any of our listeners, if you have a source, please let us know. And that's just a general idea that if you have an idea that you'd like to share, please feel free to contact us at www.torchdallas.net. torchdallas.net, and just send us your comments. We would love to hear them, and if they're really good, you could maybe get a spot on our podcast.
Great, thank you, Rabbi.
So if you take a look, go back to chapter 2, verse number 17. It says, "In the tree of knowledge of good and evil you may not eat from it, for on the day that you eat from it you shall surely die." What day is that referring to?
The day before Shabbos.
The day before Shabbos, right? Really, like, right? We understand that at any time, but really, if it would have made it till Shabbat, right, that day, then you shall surely die.
Very good. Thank you. That's an insight I hadn't learned earlier.
Okay, I'm glad I could teach you something,
Yes.
Cal. I thought you know everything already.
Far from it, Rabbi. Thank you.
Okay, so we go ahead and we continue in verse number 17. Now, all of a sudden, a curse is the ground. Before we get to man, thorns and thistles shall it sprout to you, you shall eat the herbs of the field. So man, when he was in the garden, we're talking about that he goes ahead and he now is going to have to start working the land. He's not going to have everything. He's not going to be able to sit in the garden and just pray and just connect to God, and everything else would be done for him. God now said, "No, you're out of here." So how does the punishment, and we'll get to it, that there were 10 curses, and we'll get to the 10 curses that man went through, or man received. And why does God do this to him?
if I may interrupt, I think a fundamental point that I think our listeners need to understand is that the punishments, both women and men, and we may have mentioned this earlier, is really less about disobeying Hashem, disobeying God, and doing an inappropriate action, as it was not asking for forgiveness, not doing tshuva. That had they done tshuva, they could have rectified the sin, the action.
Correct.
But they never did. They could have stayed in the garden.
Correct.
Okay. And we see that reoccurring, well, even till today, that if we just were to ask for forgiveness, a lot of the challenges could be averted.
Correct. That's what life's about. Life's all about, I never get unsettled, I would say turned off, but never get unsettled by somebody doing a sin. Because that's life. We sin. The issue is then owning it. Right? The owning the part is the part that's, to me, is always really like we're afraid to own it. And we kind of keep on, and that's exactly what Adam and Eve did in the garden. They didn't own this sin. They were very happy to, right? God had to pull it out of them. He kept on throwing them softballs, and they kept on just ignoring them.
Wow.
So man gets thrown out of the garden. That's going to rectify the sin. The sin that man did by eating from the tree is that he forgot about God, was disconnecting himself from God. And what happens is that God says, I'm going to make sure that you'll never be able to forget about me. How am I going to do that? I'm going to make it that you're going to need to plow the field. You're going to need to go ahead and you're going to need to do all these things. And when you do these things, you're going to have to turn to, you won't be able to forget about me. You have to say, okay, God, please help make this grow. God, please make it rain. I'm going to have to keep on asking from God. So God then gave me things that would force me to be engaged with him rather than doing it because I'm supposed to be engaged with him. I now have to begin to remember to keep on. I forgot about God. And God said, I'm going to make it that you won't be able to forget about me. And therefore the punishment, it's not really punishment, it's rectification of the mistake that we made, which is really all quote unquote punishments, right? There's really no such idea as punishment. It's really, we're just rectifying all the things that we might have done wrong, that we could fall into doing wrong. God comes along and God makes it that, okay, I'm going to help you rectify it.
Good.
And so God says, now it's gonna go ahead and you're gonna have to work. Why? So you remember me, says God.
And that's one of the 10 sins.
That's one of the 10 punishments.
Punishments, right.
Okay, and we'll get to the other 10. Okay, I'll do the 10, and the question that I wanted to discuss was, why was the ground cursed? Okay, so, but let's go first. What were the 10 curses that man got? So, number 1, he was originally created taller than normal as a physical reflection of his spiritual greatness. His physical status was reduced to reflect his spiritual decline. Honey, I shrunk the kids. Right? Literally, God took man and woman that were these huge physical giants, and he shrunk them because now that we messed up, right? So now our spiritual greatness had become lessened, so to our physicality became less.
Now, we want to make sure that our listening audience doesn't confuse this, because you might think, well, certain people today are taller and shorter than others. We're not suggesting that a shorter person has a greater level of sin. So I just wanted to make. Am I right on that?
Yeah, you're correct, Tom. You're correct, Tom. It's easy when you're 6'2" and you say that.
Yeah.
All right. So, okay. Verse number 2. Verse number 2. The next piece that changed, that he would feel weak whenever he would ejaculate. Number 3, the earth would grow thorns and brambles. Right. Just makes it not comfortable for us to walk on. Curse number 4, man would have anguish in earning a livelihood. Mm-hmm. Right? We'd have the pain of earning a livelihood. 5, man was to eat grass of the field. He could not eat fruits similar to the animals. Right? He got busted. Man, remember, originally was given grass of the field and fruits. Animals were only given grass of the field. And so he was supposed to get this one, that he was going to have to eat grass of the field. And when Adam heard that he and his cattle would eat the same food, he pleaded to Hashem, and the next curse was substituted for this one. And number 6, he would eat bread by the sweat of his brow.
So you're saying that this curse replaced the curse of not eating fruit.
Right. Right, because remember, the bread used to grow on trees.
And is that the source or a source, Rabbi, of some discussion of what the fruit was that he ate? Yeah.
This actually is a source, right, that says that man would now have to eat bread by the sweat of his brow, which meant that before this time, before he sinned, he didn't have to eat bread by the sweat of his brow.
So we have in the secular world, it's brought that the forbidden fruit of the tree was an apple.
Right.
We know that that's not true.
Correct. That's clearly not true. The Talmud actually goes ahead and brings down 4 opinions of what it is, a discussion, whether it was a grape, because when you drink wine you get intoxicated and do silly things, or was it a fig, because it says they covered themselves with a fig leaf, right? That they sinned with the figs, and now they used a fig leaf to cover themselves. Number 3, they say, some opinions are that it was an etrog, which is a fruit that we take on Sukkot. And the 4th opinion, which is really what we follow, is bread. That bread used to be grown in a tree. You had I call it the hot challah tree, right off the tree. And all of a sudden now we had to go ahead and we had to process. We had to actually wheat and grind it and do all these things to turn it into bread. Right? And so the sweat of the brow, and now we're going to have to eat the challah tree. And you see that this is really so. And that's the opinion. That's the majority opinion, that it was bread. And you see, very interesting, that there's a interesting law that you're not allowed to make a blessing in front of somebody who goes to the bathroom. So the question is, so if you have a baby in the room, are you allowed to make a blessing? That has a full diaper. And they say that it depends if it smells or not. Now, generally say, what causes the diaper to smell? What causes the diaper to smell is when they start eating solid foods. But till then, it's not. But it's, I think, even more than just eating solid foods. It's when he starts eating wheat. Because wheat is what caused the sin.
Wow.
And that's that smell of, that stench that comes from poop, comes from, right, that's really the smell of death, or the smell of decay, which is a smell of sin. So then you have number 7, that Adam lost the initial extraordinary beauty that God gave him. This original beauty was a physical manifestation of his spiritual beauty. Okay? And so man lost that. Number 8, the snake lost his hands and feet and could no longer serve him. He could no longer serve man, which was and his intended role was an effective servant for man. Right? The Talmud talks about that the snakes were on the grill, grilling away for Adam and Eve. But now the snake lost his hands and feet, and voila, right, we lost our servant. Right, and by the way, if you take a look on the snake, on the spines of snakes, there's places where they used to have hands and feet. Number 9. Adam was banished from the Garden of Eden and lost his status as Lord and Master of the world. Right? He got bounced from his position. And number 10, men being dust would return to dust. He was destined to die and to be buried. Right? That now, right, till this point in time, he wasn't going to die. But now he was going to have death and be buried in the ground, right? And then actually that his body disintegrating is part of this becoming, right, being returned to God. Right? That's why in Judaism we do not do cremations, because our bodies don't belong to us. Our bodies belong to God, and now they need to be returned to God. And so something to always remember about that.
Are there any exceptions to that?
To
cremation versus?
No.
Okay.
Now what's interesting is that we said that the ground got cursed because of man. So why was the ground cursed? What did the ground do wrong?
Well, man was created from the ground.
Okay.
So is there a relationship that you wouldn't think so? So that's a great question.
And so why was man cursed?
Why was the ground?
Why was the ground cursed? So now you have to go back to the story on day number 3, chapter 1, day number 3, when God told the ground to produce a tree that was that was a fruit itself. The tree itself tasted like fruit, being fruit bearing. And what happened was the ground did not produce a fruit tree bearing fruit. It produced a tree that produced fruit.
So are you suggesting that at that point you could have eaten the tree itself and it would have tasted like the fruit?
Yes, sir. And if you go back to our podcast, you will see that that's what we said then. So when the tree, and we said, why did the tree not listen? Even how could it not listen? And we said that since man, and the essence of man is free will, and the body of man is created by dirt, and the physical part of man also has to have the ability of free will. So that's why when the earth listening, quote unquote, to God, there had to be a place where it kind of, quote unquote, disobeyed God, to show that the physical part of man also had the idea of free will. And we said specifically in the tree was where it didn't listen, because man is called the tree of the field. As the verse says, Ki ha'adam eitz hasada, because man is the tree of the field. So what happens is, and so man is this tree of the field. The ground didn't listen. So now when man gets punished, man, quote unquote, man and woman get punished, the ground that didn't listen to God to produce a fruit tree bearing fruit, now the ground got punished as well. How? Thorns and thistles were going to grow on it, right? And right, thorns and thistles, right? And this kind of went on, right? It's actually quite interesting, right? Because if you actually go, right, and turn to chapter, I think, Parshas Noach, chapter 11, where when Noach gets created, Noach is called Noach. Why was he called Noach? Sorry, at the end of Bereshit. We're going to get to it. Right? Right, in Genesis chapter 5, verse number 29. Right? It says Lamech lived 182 years and begot a son, calls his name Noach, saying, "This will bring us rest from our work and from the toil of our hands, from the ground which Hashem had cursed." Right? That's verse 29. And Rashi over here says the following idea, is that Noach went and he created the plow, and the earth was producing thorns and thistles when it's supposed to produce, right, when they would plant wheat, right, then it wouldn't just produce wheat, it would produce thorns and thistles. That at this point in time, that Noach created the plow, the times of Noach, they created a plow, which was now able to plow it and to make it that the thorns and thistles wouldn't grow. And that's why Noach means to rest, that they now were going to rest from this curse that we have over here at the end of chapter 3, right, that the earth is going to produce thorns and thistles.
Was this the first demonstration or discussion of technology? Because Noah created a technological implement at the time that was
kind of cool.
Yeah, earth-breaking.
Yeah, sure.
Literally earth-breaking.
Yeah.
Breaking up the earth, I mean.
Yeah, but it's actually, we're going to get to it. Actually, in chapter 4, there's a lot of technology.
Okay, good. Oh, well, audience, we have to stay tuned.
All righty, stay tuned. There's a lot of Torah to learn, my friends. Okay, so thorns and thistles shall it sprout for you, and you shall eat the herbs of the field. By the sweat of your brow shall you eat bread until you return to the ground from which you were taken. For you are dust, and to dust shall you return.
Very good.
Thank you all for listening to podcast Breakneck Through the Bible. Thank you, Tom. And we look forward to sharing with you the next episode.
And audience, let me just tell you, the next episode gets very heated. Thanks, Rabbi.
Thank you, Tom.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Breakneck Through the Bible, as presented by Torch Dallas. Please like and subscribe to this podcast.